Steve Harvey held a veteran S hand on stage, and what happened next brought the entire crowd to tears. In a moment that transcended entertainment, this simple gesture cracked open a floodgate of raw emotion that left an entire studio audience in tears. What began as a typical segment on Harvey's show suddenly became something profoundly different, something real. The veteran hadn't planned to share his story that day, but sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we least expect them. What happened next didn't just move a crowd to tears, it reminded everyone watching what it truly means to be human. Steve Harvey walked onto that stage like he had 1,000 times before, confident, commanding, ready to deliver laughs and entertainment to thousands of viewers tuning in from home. His signature smile was in place, his timing was sharp, and the energy he carried with him filled every corner of the studio with anticipation. The audience was electric. They did come for a show, and Steve Harvey never disappointed. The applause rolled like thunder as he greeted them, shook hands with the front row, and launched into his opening monologue with the precision of a seasoned performer who knows exactly how to work a crowd. People were already laughing, already leaning forward in their seats, ready for whatever entertainment magic he was about to weave. But then, somewhere in the middle of a joke, scanning the crowd during his opening monologue, Steve's eyes locked onto something different. In the sea of faces, a man sitting alone, several rows back, shoulders slightly hunched, staring down at his hands like they held the weight of the world itself. He wasn't laughing, he wasn't even smiling. While everyone around him was engaged, animated, caught up in the moment, this man seemed to exist in a different reality entirely. This wasn't just another face in the audience. There was something haunting about his stillness, something that cut through the noise and laughter surrounding him like a knife. The man's jaw was clenched. His fingers were interlaced tightly, knuckles white with tension. Every muscle in his body seemed to be holding something back, something heavy, something painful. Steve's instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had made him one of the most successful entertainers in America. He spent decades reading people, understanding what lies beneath the surface, decoding the unspoken language of human emotion. And what he saw in this veteran's eyes was unmistakable, a pain so deep, so profound, that it demanded to be acknowledged. It was the kind of pain that doesn't come from everyday struggles. This was something else. This was something that had been carved into his soul. In a split-second decision that would deviate from his carefully planned script entirely, Steve made a choice that would ripple far beyond this single moment. He called the veteran down to the stage. The audience erupted in cheers, thinking this was just another comedic bit. Another moment of Steve's spontaneous entertainment magic. They expected a funny interaction, a laugh at the veteran's expense perhaps, or some heartwarming but ultimately light-hearted exchange. This was Steve Harvey, after all, a master of feel-good television moments. But what Steve saw in that veteran's eyes would change the entire atmosphere of the show in seconds. What started as a routine moment was about to become something nobody in that studio would ever forget. As the veteran slowly made his way to the stage, Steve could see the hesitation in every step. The man moved like someone carrying invisible chains, his body rigid, his movements deliberate but uncertain. Each stride seemed to require enormous effort, as if he were walking through water rather than across the smooth stage floor. The applause that had erupted moments before seemed to make him more uncomfortable, not less. The noise, the attention, the spotlight of it appeared to be pressing down on him like a physical weight. He wasn't seeking attention, and much was crystal clear to anyone watching. His eyes darted around the studio, taking in the hundreds of faces turned toward him, the cameras capturing every moment, the lights bearing down from above. For a man accustomed to blending into crowds, to surviving by remaining unnoticed, this sudden exposure was almost unbearable. When the veteran finally reached the stage, Steve extended his hand in greeting, but instead of the quick, perfunctory handshake he'd given 100 guests before, something shifted in the air between them. It was as if Steve had flipped a switch inside himself, transitioning from entertainer to something more, a listener, a witness, a human being recognizing another human being's pain. Steve looked directly into the man's eyes, and in that gaze, he saw it all written like an open book. The unmistakable weight of service, of sacrifice, of battles fought both on distant battlefields under scorching sun and in the quiet, lonely corners of the mine during sleepless nights. He saw the haunted look of someone who had seen things that couldn't be unseen, done things that couldn't be undone. "What's your name, brother?" Steve asked, his voice stripped of its usual comedic edge, the rapid-fire delivery replaced with measured, intentional words. The question was simple on the surface, but the tone underneath was profoundly different from his stage persona. It was genuine, it was present. It was one human being asking another human being to trust him with their story. "Marcus," the veteran replied, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile inside him, something that had been held together by threads for far too long. His name hung in the air like a confession. Steve didn't rush. He didn't pivot to a joke to ease the tension or lighten the mood. He simply held Marcus's hand, not letting go, but maintaining that physical connection, and asked with a voice full of compassion, "Marcus, how long have you been carrying this weight?" The question hung in the air like a bell that had just been rung. The studio fell completely silent. Even the audience seemed to understand instinctively that this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something real, something sacred, something that demanded respect and silence. Marcus's jaw tightened visibly. His eyes glistened with moisture that threatened to spill over. For a long moment, it looked like he might turn and walk away, retreat back to the safety of anonymity and isolation that had become his refuge. His shoulders tensed, his free hand clenched into a fist at his side, and his gaze dropped to the floor. But Steve's grip on his hand remained steady, warm, and somehow reassuring. It was the kind of grip that communicated without words. "I'm here. I'm listening. You were safe." And somehow, that simple physical connection gave Marcus permission to be vulnerable in front of thousands of people, millions watching from home, in a moment that was being recorded and would live forever in the digital age. 12 years, Marcus finally answered, his voice cracking slightly at the edges, each word seeming to cost him something precious. 12 years since I came back. 12 years of trying to pretend everything's normal. 12 years of waking up at 3 in the morning in cold sweats. 12 years of avoiding crowds, avoiding loud noises, avoiding anything that might trigger the memories. Steve's expression softened even further, his eyes reflecting genuine empathy and understanding. He gently guided Marcus to sit down, pulling up a chair beside him rather than maintaining the typical talk show distance. This gesture was significant. Steve was literally placing himself on the same level as Marcus, creating equality rather than hierarchy. The audience remained completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something that transcended the boundaries of a typical talk show, something that would likely stay with them long after the credits rolled and the studio lights dimmed. "Tell me about it," Steve said quietly, his voice low and intimate despite the thousands of people listening. "Tell me what happened. Tell me what you've been carrying all these years." And when Marcus began to speak, his words tumbling out slowly at first, then faster, as if a dam had finally broken and the floodwaters of emotion and memory could no longer be contained. Marcus took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling heavily as if he were preparing to dive into deep, dark waters. His hands trembled slightly as he began to speak, and Steve noticed that she squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently, a silent reassurance that he was there, that he was listening. "I was stationed in Kandahar," Marcus began, his voice distant, as if he were speaking from somewhere far away, somewhere trapped in the past. 2013. I was 24 years old, full of idealism, thinking I was going to make a difference, thinking I was a hero. He paused, swallowing hard. I wasn't prepared for what I was about to experience. The studio remained perfectly still. Every person in the audience seemed to be holding their breath. "We were on a routine patrol," Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance. Or at least, that's what we thought it was. My best friend Tommy was right beside me. We'd grown up together, joined the service together, trained together. He was like a brother to me, closer than my actual brother, if I'm being honest. Steve remained silent, understanding that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply your presence and your silence. We turned a corner in the marketplace, and everything changed in an instant. 1 second we were walking, the next, Marcus's voice broke. He stopped speaking, his jaw clenching as he fought to maintain composure. Tears began streaming down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. "Take your time," Steve said softly, his hand never leaving Marcus's shoulder. Marcus nodded, gathering himself. There was an explosion, improvised explosive device. I remember the sound first, this deafening roar that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then the heat, then the chaos, screaming, dust everywhere. And when the smoke cleared, his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Tommy was gone, just gone. A woman in the audience began crying quietly. Others wiped their eyes. "I was wounded," Marcus continued, pulling up his sleeve to reveal scars that crisscrossed his arm like a roadmap of trauma. "Shrapnel. Burns. But the physical wounds healed. It's the other wounds, the ones you can see toes, are the ones that never healed." Steve leaned closer. "What happened after that?" "I came home," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "Everyone called me a hero. They threw parades. People thanked me for my service. But inside, I was broken. I had nightmares every single night. I couldn't sleep without seeing Tommy's face. I couldn't go to crowded places without feeling like another bomb was about to go off. I couldn't maintain relationships because I was too afraid, too angry, too lost." He looked directly at Steve now, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. "I tried to end it," Marcus said quietly. 3 times. 3 times I tried to take my own life because I couldn't live with the guilt, the memories, the feeling that I should have been the one who died instead of Tommy. Why did I survive and he didn't? What made me special? What made me worthy of living when he wasn't? The studio erupted in emotion, people openly weeping now, understanding the gravity of what Marcus was sharing, the darkness he had been battling alone for 12 years. "But I'm still here," Marcus said, and for the first time there was a hint of something else in his voice, not quite hope, but perhaps the faintest glimmer of it. "I don't know why. Some days I still don't know why, but I'm here." Steve pulled Marcus into an embrace, and the veteran's body shook with sobs. 12 years of pain finally finding release in that moment of human connection, in being truly seen and heard by another person who cared enough to stop and listen. The audience stood up, applauding not out of entertainment, but out of respect, out of recognition of the courage it took for Marcus to share his truth. After several moments, Steve gently released Marcus from the embrace and guided him back to his seat. The applause continued, but it was different now, respectful, reverent, acknowledging the vulnerability and courage on display. Steve waited for the noise to settle before speaking again, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that his usual comedic persona could never convey. "Marcus," Steve began, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that there are thousands of people in this room and millions watching at home who need to hear your answer. When you say you don't know why you're still here, have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, you survived for a reason? That perhaps your story, your pain, your survival was meant to touch other people's lives?" Marcus looked at Steve, his eyes red and swollen from crying, but something in his expression had shifted. It was subtle, but it was there, a crack in the wall of despair that had surrounded him for so long. "I never thought about it that way," Marcus admitted, his voice still trembling but gaining strength with each word. "I've spent so long thinking about why I shouldn't be here that I never considered why I should be." Steve nodded slowly. "You know, I've been doing this for a long time and I've interviewed thousands of people. But there's something about your story, Marcus, that I think needs to be heard. Not just by the people in this room, but by every veteran, every person struggling with PTSD, every person who's lost someone they love to war, every person who's contemplated ending their own life." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Have you ever thought about sharing your story publicly? About becoming an advocate for veterans' mental health?" Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Me? I am not a public speaker. I'm not I'm not special. You are more special than you know, Steve said firmly. And I am not just saying that. I mean it with every fiber of my being. Your story matters. Tommy's memory matters. And the fact that you survived, that you were still here, still fighting at, matters too. The camera panned across the audience, capturing faces wet with tears, people nodding in agreement, understanding the profound truth in what Steve was saying. I want to do something for you, Steve continued, standing up and walking to the edge of the stage. He gestured to someone off camera, and within moments, a representative from a major veterans organization walked onto the stage carrying a folder. This, Steve said, holding up the folder, is information about a comprehensive program we've put together with several organizations dedicated to helping veterans like you. It includes access to counseling, peer support groups, job training, and most importantly, a community of people who understand exactly what you've been through. He handed the folder to Marcus, who took it with shaking hands. But that's not all, Steve continued. I am also personally inviting you to come back on this show in 6 months, not to relive your trauma, but to share your journey of healing. Because I have a feeling, Marcus, that you are going to do extraordinary things with your life. I have a feeling that Tommy's memory is going to live on through the lives you touch, the people you help, the hope you inspire. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but words seemed to fail him. Instead, tears began flowing again, but this time they seemed different. These weren't tears of despair. They were tears of possibility, of recognition, of being truly seen for the first time in 12 years. There's one more thing, Steve said, and he turned to address the entire audience. I want every veteran watching this right now to know that your service matters, your sacrifice matters. And if you re-struggling, if you re-in pain, if you having thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out. There are people who care. There are resources available. You don't have to suffer alone. He looked back at Marcus. You are not alone anymore, brother. You hear me? You are not alone. Marcus nodded, unable to speak, but his eyes conveyed everything that needed to be said. In that moment, something shifted, not just for Marcus, but for everyone witnessing this exchange. It was a moment of human connection, of compassion, of recognition that behind every uniform, behind every service member, there was a person with hopes and dreams and fears and pain. The studio erupted in applause once more, but this time it felt different. It felt like a collective acknowledgement of something sacred, something true, something that mattered far more than entertainment or ratings, or any of the typical metrics by which television success was measured. As the applause continued, Steve placed his arm around Marcus's shoulders, and the veteran who had spent 12 years believing he didn't deserve to be alive finally, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his life had value. Maybe his story could matter. Maybe his survival had meaning after all. And in that moment, in front of thousands of witnesses and millions of viewers, a man who had been drowning in darkness finally saw a light. In the weeks that followed the show, something remarkable began to happen in Marcus's life. The weight of his past was still there, but it was no longer suffocating him. Instead, it felt more like a heavy blanketone that he could lift off himself, one that he could choose to move away from when he needed to. The connections he had made during the show sparked a new sense of purpose within him. Marcus received an outpouring of support from veterans organizations, mental health advocates, and everyday people who had been touched by his story. Many reached out with messages of encouragement, sharing their own experiences and struggles, reminding him that he was not alone in his journey. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. The folder Steve had given him became a lifeline. He connected with a counselor who specialized in veterans issues, and together they began unpacking the trauma that had haunted him for so long. Marcus learned coping strategies to manage his PTSD. He started attending support group meetings, where he met others who understood the unique challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life. Each session became a step forward, a step toward healing. One day, during a group meeting, Marcus shared Tommy's story. He spoke about the dreams they had shared, the laughter, the plans for the future that had been abruptly shattered. He opened up about the guilt that had weighed on him for years, only to find that many of his peers were grappling with similar feelings. The catharsis was powerful, a release that he hadn't anticipated, and he realized that sharing his pain could also help others carry theirs. Inspired by this realization, Marcus made a decision. He wanted to honor Tommy's memory and the memories of other fallen soldiers by helping veterans navigate their own struggles. He began volunteering at the very organization that had reached out to him after the show. His role was to facilitate support groups, share his experiences, and most importantly, listen. Listening became his superpower. As months turned into a year, Marcus found himself growing stronger. He started to speak publicly about his experiences, sharing his journey of healing at various events and workshops focused on mental health awareness. He became an advocate for veterans, emphasizing the importance of seeking help and breaking the stigma surrounding mental health issues. Each time he stepped on stage to share his story, he felt the chains of his past loosening, as if he were shedding layers of hurt and pain. The first time he stood in front of a large audience to speak, he was terrified. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, he remembered Steve's words, "You're not alone anymore." He took a deep breath and shared not just his story but the lessons he had learned along the way. Surviving is not enough, he told them. We have to live, we have to find purpose, we have to reach out to one another. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. That's how we heal. The response was overwhelming. People approached him after the speech, thanking him for his honesty and courage. Some shared their own stories, and in those moments of connection, Marcus felt the weight of his past shift. Each conversation was a reminder that healing was a collective journey, that sharing burdens could lead to lighter hearts. One evening, after a particularly moving event, Marcus received a message from Steve. "I've been following your journey, and I am so proud of you. You're making a real difference." That simple message filled Marcus with gratitude. It reminded him of the pivotal moment on the talk show when he first began to see the possibility of a life beyond his pain. He replied, "Thank you, Steve. You helped me believe I could speak my truth and that my story could matter. I'm working on a project to help veterans, and I would love to get your thoughts on it." As they continued to communicate, Steve became a mentor to Marcus, guiding him through the process of organizing community events and outreach programs. Together, they planned a series of workshops aimed at educating veterans and their families about mental health resources, coping strategies, and the importance of community support. With Steve's help, they launched Voices of Valor, a community initiative designed to empower veterans to share their stories and connect with one another. The program quickly gained traction, attracting attention from local media and veteran advocacy groups. Marcus found himself at the forefront of a movement that was changing lives, inspiring veterans to reclaim their narratives and find hope in shared experiences. As the initiative grew, Marcus felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He was no longer just a survivor, he was a beacon of hope for others navigating the darkness. His relationship with Tommy transformed as well. Instead of being a source of guilt, Tommy's memory became a driving force behind Marcus's mission. He honored his friend's spirit by advocating for those who could not speak for themselves and by reminding others that they were never truly alone. In the quiet moments when he reflected on his journey, Marcus recognized that healing wasn't linear. There were still tough days, moments when the shadows threatened to creep back in. But he had learned to lean on the connections he had built, to reach out when he needed support, and to embrace the light that existed in community. With each passing year, Marcus grew more confident in his ability to navigate life with its ups and downs. His story, once shrouded in pain, became a testament to resilience, a narrative that spoke of hope, healing, and the power of human connection. And as he continued to share his journey, he found that every time he spoke, he was not just telling his own story. He was weaving a tapestry of countless experiences, all leading toward the same truth, that together we can overcome anything. As the months rolled on, Marcus found himself deeply immersed in the work of Voices of Valor. The initiative began to take shape beyond his wildest dreams, blossoming into a multifaceted program that provided essential resources for veterans and their families. This growth was fueled not only by his passion, but also by the collective energy of a community that was ready for change. With each workshop and seminar, Marcus witnessed firsthand the healing power of shared experiences. Veterans from all walks of life gathered to talk about their journey. Some had served in combat, while others had supported the military in various capacities. Each story was unique, yet they all resonated with common themes of sacrifice, loss, and the ongoing struggle for mental wellness. One of the most impactful workshops they organized was titled Healing Through Storytelling. In this session, veterans were encouraged to share their personal narratives in a safe and supportive environment. The first time Marcus facilitated this workshop, he was nervous. He had prepared extensively, but as the moment approached, he found himself questioning whether he was truly equipped to lead such a vulnerable space. However, as the veterans began to share their stories, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose wash over him. Each narrative unfolded like a flower blooming in the sunlight, fragile yet beautiful, laden with pain yet brimming with resilience. He listened intently as a former Marine recounted his battle with PTSD, describing the suffocating grip of anxiety that followed him home. Another participant, a woman who had served in the Air Force, spoke about her feelings of isolation and the challenges of reintegrating into civilian life after her deployment. As they shared, tears flowed freely, laughter erupted at unexpected moments, and deep connections formed among the participants. Marcus facilitated discussions about coping strategies, encouraging each veteran to explore what had helped them find moments of peace amidst the chaos. They spoke about mindfulness, art therapy, physical fitness, and the importance of maintaining connections with fellow veterans. The room buzzed with energy, and by the end of the session, the atmosphere felt electric-charged with hope and possibility. After each workshop, participants lingered, exchanging contact information, forming friendships, and promising to support one another. It was heartwarming for Marcus to witness these connections blossom. The loneliness that had once shrouded so many veterans began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of belonging. Marcus knew that while the road to recovery was long and often winding, they were no longer walking it alone. As the initiative gained traction, local media outlets began to take notice. Stories about Voices of Valor appeared in newspapers, on television, and across social media platforms. Marcus was invited to speak on various podcasts and radio shows, sharing not only his own story, but also the stories of the veterans who had found their voices through the initiative. He became an advocate for mental health awareness, using his platform to educate the public about the challenges faced by veterans and the importance of community support. During one particular radio interview, Marcus spoke passionately about the stigma surrounding mental health issues. "It's time we stop treating mental health like a taboo subject," he asserted. "Our veterans deserve the same respect and care for their mental well-being as they receive for their physical injuries. We need to normalize these conversations, to create spaces where veterans feel safe to express their struggles without fear of judgment." His words resonated with listeners, and the response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from people who had been touched by his story, many of whom were veterans themselves. They shared their own experiences, expressing gratitude for the visibility Marcus was bringing to an often overlooked issue. As Voices of Valor continued to expand, Marcus realized that they needed to provide even more comprehensive support. He reached out to mental health professionals, inviting therapists and counselors to participate in workshops, offering their expertise to the veterans who attended. This collaboration enriched the program, allowing veterans to access professional guidance in addition to peer support. One of the most significant developments came when Marcus partnered with local businesses to create a job training program for veterans. He believed that employment was a crucial factor in successful reintegration into civilian life. By collaborating with companies willing to hire veterans, they provided resume workshops, interview coaching, and skill-building sessions. The program aimed not only to equip veterans with practical tools, but also to instill a sense of purpose and dignity. The first job fair they organized was a resounding success. Veterans lined up to meet potential employers, their faces filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. Marcus walked around the room, greeting participants and offering encouragement. He spoke to one veteran who had been unemployed for over a year, sharing his own journey and the importance of perseverance. "Every no brings you closer to a yes," Marcus said, placing a reassuring hand on the man's shoulder. "Keep pushing forward. You are not defined by your past, you were defined by your resilience and your willingness to keep trying." As the job fair progressed, success stories began to emerge. Several veterans walked away with job offers, their faces beaming with pride and excitement. Marcus felt a swell of joy as he watched them celebrate their achievements, knowing that these opportunities represented a significant step toward reclaiming their lives. But amidst all the progress, Marcus also faced challenges. There were moments of self-doubt and setbacks that threatened to shake his resolve. Some veterans he worked with struggled to engage, battling their own demons that made it difficult to participate in the program. Marcus learned quickly that healing is not linear. It often involves taking one step forward and two steps back. In those moments of frustration, he leaned on the support of his fellow facilitators and the veterans who had become his friends. They reminded him that every effort mattered, that even small victories were worth celebrating. Together, they fostered an environment where resilience was cultivated and hope was nurtured. As Marcus continued to advocate for veterans, he also took time for self-care. He recognized the importance of maintaining his own mental wellness as he supported others. He began practicing mindfulness techniques, engaging in physical activities like hiking and yoga, and prioritizing time with family and friends. This balance became essential, fueling his ability to give back to the community that had supported him. One evening, while reflecting on his journey, Marcus found himself staring at a photo of Tommy. It was taken during their last deployment, both of them grinning widely in front of a backdrop of mountains. The memory flooded back, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. "Thank you, my brother," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm doing this for you, for us. Your memory will live on through the lives we touch." As he continued his work with voices of valor, Marcus knew that the journey was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, new stories, and new opportunities to make a difference. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a leader, a mentor, and a friend to those who needed it most. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its bumps, but Marcus had learned to embrace the journey, knowing that he was part of something greater than himself. Together with the community he had helped to build, he was committed to creating a future where every veteran could find their voice, heal their wounds, and thrive in the light of hope.